we've been talking about prayer. Looked at a number of things about improving our prayer, about how our flesh seeks to interrupt our prayer life, at how Jesus gave us some pointers on how to pray and the level of faith that is necessary for us to maintain if we're going to have successful prayer. We looked at praying scripture, and then last time we talked about postures within prayer, as well as named 4 different types of prayer that we can engage in. So that's what we've looked at thus far. So let me begin with a little bit of background. The passage we're going to look at here in just a moment has David finally taking the throne as the king of Israel. That has been a long, arduous process. Scholars debate how old David may have been when he was initially anointed. The Hebrew word that is used when his father says he's but a youth is the word that means he was not past adolescent age. So he may have been 10, 15 years old when he is anointed the next king. And then we recognize how that there's a whole bunch of turmoil begins to take place between he and Saul, and David is on the run. His life is just very tumultuous after he is anointed. But now he is going to become the king of Israel. We recognize he's now 30 years old. So it could have been 15, 20 years before he becomes king after he was anointed as king. When he finally comes to the place, the king of Tyre actually is recorded as sending up diplomats to meet with him. He sends out some materials because they want to build David a new palace. So this guy he's wanting to connect and get on the good side of David very quickly. So that all is recorded for us. David's power and authority become clearly established, and he settles in as king. He settles in Jerusalem. He takes more wives and concubines, begins to have more children. All of this now is establishing David as the new king over Israel. But here's what we read in 2 Samuel chapter 5. When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over Israel, they all went in search of David. But he heard about it, and he went down to the stronghold. So the Philistines came and spread out in the valley of Rephaim. Here is where that valley is located. You notice how close it is to the city of Jerusalem. It's 3 miles from Bethlehem. So when it says they came to this valley, we might think, okay, where's the nearest valley in Nebraska? And we might, well, that's over, by the Missouri River. No, this is just right there. And so when it says that the Philistines came, it's like, in all probability, you could look from Jerusalem and see that there was a camp of people out there in this valley, or at least you would know that that was happening. So this particular valley is a very fertile valley. We find that the Philistines often fought for this area because of the nature of the prosperous ground that was there. And the name Rephaim means the Valley of Giants, which again, we remember David killed Goliath, who was a Philistine giant. So all of those things kind of factor in here as we think about who these people were. Then David inquired of the Lord, should I go to war against the Philistines? Will you hand them over to me? And the Lord replied to David, go, and I will certainly hand the Philistines over to you. So David went to Baal-perazim and defeated them there. Like a bursting flood, the Lord has burst out against my enemies before me. Therefore he named the place the Lord burst out, or Baal-perazim. So we've got this valley of Rephaim, and then we have this place that David's going to call Baal-perazim. What we find out from the word itself, the word Baal is a very familiar word. If you've read through the Old Testament, you've come upon it often. We've read about the prophets of Baal. Baal was the primary Phoenician male god. He was the ultimate god, perhaps I guess like Zeus in Greek mythology. He is the powerhouse. So that is who is being referenced. The word itself means to be dominant over. It means to lord over, to own or to rule over something. It was interesting, one of the sources I read said the Jews even used this word to refer to someone who was angry that they were the Lord of the Snort. Perazim is the second part of the word that David names this area. The root means to break or to divide, to split. It is used in Micah chapter 2 and verse 13 of breaking and enclosure. Verse 13 here says, one who breaks open the way will advance before them. So the idea of busting through someplace, making headway. It's also used in Psalm chapter 60 in reference to breaking, if you will, the heart of stubbornness or breaking pride. God, you have rejected us, you have broken out against us. So the arrogance of the people is referenced there as this breaking. Or in 2 Kings chapter 14, King Jehoash goes up against Israel, or Jerusalem, and it says that he broke a 200-yard hole in the wall of Jerusalem between the Ephraim and the corner gate. And so it was a breach in the wall. David names the place of defeat of the Philistines Baal Perazim. Jehovah broke through. It's in Isaiah that we actually learned that this was a mountain, which is fitting because in the text that we did read, the Philistines abandoned their idols at this place. So it undoubtedly was, if you will, one of the high places of worship that the Philistines had in their service to Baal. And so when David renames it Baal Perazim, it's like in your face. Your God didn't do it. My God burst through. My God won the victory. Thus, the bursting out or the breakthrough of God at this location is not only a military statement, but it also is a spiritual statement. So when David said, my God broke through, he's saying, my God spiritually broke through. And therein is the foundation of what I want to consider this morning, and that is the fact that we all long for spiritual breakthroughs. We all long for occasions when God, if you will, sends a flood of water and breaks through something. I truly believe that probably everyone who is hearing me is either wishing for, looking for, or longing for a spiritual breakthrough of some kind. And just to help us focus on that reality, I know that there are people who are confused. You know, life has just presented some issues that are just confusing, and you're wanting God to break through. You may have even asked God to demonstrate, to reveal his will, and this confusion persists, and you're longing for God to break through with something. There may be something that has just totally overwhelmed you. Never dealt with this before, have no idea where to go, how to process, and you're just totally feeling overwhelmed, and you are longing for some kind of spiritual breakthrough. You might just be tired. Just tired. And God, send something, do something to awaken me, to liven me up again. Might be feeling outnumbered. Maybe, you know, the people that seem to be against you are more than those who are for you. And you're feeling outnumbered. And you're just longing for some kind of a spiritual breakthrough. It could even be that you're really weary of the brethren. That people have, brothers and sisters, you've grown tired, and you're tired of behavior, you're tired of actions, and so you're weary, and you're just saying, God, just send me some kind of a breakthrough. Health is another area where sometimes we just long for a breakthrough. We just want God to show himself, to bust something open. Relationships, another area where we may be longing for God to demonstrate his power, his works. Might be a situation at school, something at work or in business that we're longing for God to break through. If you're a parent, it might be children. God, give me a breakthrough here. I've never had a teenager before, and look, you know, this is rough. So there are any number of things, any number of avenues that we're all sitting here, and we're longing for God to show himself, to demonstrate it. We are wanting a Baal Perazim. We're wanting a time where God's just going to break something wide open. We're longing for that. We're hungry for that. In the past few weeks, we have discussed how that there are times when our prayers feel to us shut out. And so We are longing for these things. We're praying about these things, but sometimes our prayers feel like they're shut out, that we're not being heard. The answers aren't coming. And so that just adds to the bewilderment of longing for the occasion where God's going to show himself strong. Where are you, God? And so many of our songs today just had to do with that. Count your blessing. It is well with my soul when the tempest is raging. You know, the songs fit so well with some of this. It is true that our understanding of God's answers may be deficient. However, we may discover that it's not God who is the reason that we're not getting our breakthroughs. There may be some identifiable details which indicate that we may be the major contributor for our lack of experiencing spiritual breakthroughs, not God. That is based upon some of the things I observe in this text in 1 Samuel. So let me just make some observations from what we've looked at. First of all, great spiritual strides are usually followed by enemy attacks. David's brought to the throne of Israel. He's waited maybe 15 years, and he's brought to the throne of Israel. He's got the king of Tyre bringing in equipment and workers to build him a palace. This has got to be just, wow, this is just, I am now king. And all of a sudden, boom. And you know, that's exactly how life works, isn't it? About the time you're on the mountaintop, guess what? Here comes the valley, and I'm not talking about Sebastian. Here comes the trouble. We get to the high places, and that's one of the things we find here, is let's not expect that we're going to have these moments of great spiritual strength without there being something on the fringe that's ready to bring us low. Another thing that I learned here is that the enemy comes with the intent of lording over our spiritual heart. You know, Satan has one desire, and it's not just to tempt us and to try us, and not just even to devour and bring us to complete annihilation. All he wants to do is get our heart. That's all he has to do. All he has to do is to get us to believe that God is not going to break through for you, and he's got us. So we need, I think, to understand from this text that the enemy is really just longing to gain that control of our heart. He does so by appearing as an insurmountable giant. Just too big, just too awesome. Cannot overcome this, cannot deal with this situation. The enemy also has the power, and I love the way that the text talks about the Philistines. They spread out through this valley. Isn't that what happens to you when it feels like God's not breaking through? Doesn't it seem like that issue just kind of spreads out and it just kind of goes everywhere? You remember the old movie Mr. Flubber? You know, that stuff, it just kind of went everywhere. And isn't that how it feels when things are not there for us? That negativity just spreads out, giving it, if you will, the facade of having extra strength. The arsenal of the enemy includes corrupted and imaginary gods. And also, I think we need to understand that one victory does not predicate the surrender of the enemy. Because if we go back to the text, here's what it says as we continue on. The Philistines came up again. David ran them off, named this place, but then it says they came up again and they spread out in the valley of Rephaim, and David inquired of the Lord. So this time God says, okay, you don't take them on head on, you come around the backside. And he says, you get there and then you stop, and when you hear the marching people in the balsam tree, when you hear that noise, then you know we're going to march ahead of you and attack the camp of the Philistines. Another observation, breakthroughs are the occasions in which God's flooding abilities erode all that is holding one hostage or imprisoned. When God breaks through, when we are in a position where we let God break through, he floods all of those things. They are washed away in a torrent, and he is the God of the breakthrough. But again, it's not because he's not able that we don't get those things sometimes. It's because of our inability. God's ability and power never vacillate. Breakthroughs, therefore, may have more to do with us than they do with him. For us to have a breakthrough, we must do what is necessary to experience a breakthrough. If we want God's ability to break through a situation in our life, we have to be obedient and do what God says we need to do in order for that to happen. Have any of you ever audited a class? You know, it just kind of means you don't have to pay as much money. You don't have to take the test. You don't get a grade. You just get the information, right? I mean, you just hear the stuff and you get to get the information, but there isn't a whole lot that you have to invest in it. You know, there is no auditing Christianity. And yet sometimes that's how we live. Like, we just be there, get the information, you know, just participate. But I don't want to have to take any test, you know, especially these spiritual tests, this breakthrough stuff. You know, I'm just gonna pray, and if God doesn't do it, then I have the right to whine and complain, and I just turn negative, and that's the way I'm going to do this. I'm just going to audit Christianity. No, it doesn't work that way. It's not the way it works. I want to end by just looking very quickly at some points that Paul is going to make, points that reveal how we're going to get ourselves ready for God to break through the situations that we long for him to break into. Philippians chapter 4. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your graciousness be known to everyone. The Lord is near. Don't worry about anything, but in everything through prayer and petition with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses every thought, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any moral excellence and if there's any praise, dwell on these things. Do what you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, and the God of peace will be with you. Okay, the text begins with rejoice, and it ends up with the peace of God being with us. Folks, that sounds like breakthrough language to me. To be able to rejoice always and have God's peace, it sounds to me like God has broken through situations. It's what lies in between that becomes for us the standard that I need to live up to if I'm going to allow and if I'm going to get God's breakthrough power in my life. Between those two things, Paul seems, I think, to outline the process by which saints seek successfully God's spiritual sovereignty over their stressful situations. Yeah, it did that to me to come up with that. Number one, we need to move off worry. We need to move off worry. We're wanting God to give us a breakthrough moment. The first thing we have to do is we have to move off worry. Someone commented in my reading, they said they thought the hardest command in the whole Bible was to not worry. The hardest command to keep in the whole Bible was to not worry. Remember Jesus, therefore don't worry about tomorrow because tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Worthy is a number of things, and none of them are that which prepares the way for God to break through in the situation that we're wanting him to break through. First of all, worry is worthless. Worry does absolutely no purpose. It has no purpose. It is worthless. It is also a corrupt form of control. If I'm stuck in worry, I'm trying to control something. It also is stewing without doing. I like that one. Stewing without doing. It is a focus on fears, not the Father. And this one is scary. Worry is practical atheism. It's denying God his sovereign control. It's as though God doesn't exist when I decide to live in worry. Now, you notice I chose the phrase, we need to move off worry, because there's none of us in this room that don't find occasions to worry. The secret is not to dwell there. The secret is to move off of worry. I think we recognize that the mind that is set on the flesh is death. So our natural response to many things because of our flesh is going to be worry. But we must secure a means of moving off worry if we're able to make ourselves ready for a spiritual breakthrough. And that's some of what Peter, I think, was implying when he said that we cast our anxieties on him because he cares for you. You see, we are taking the worries and we're giving them to God, the one we're wanting to break through the situation that's causing us to worry. So the first thing that Paul says is if we're going to make ready for God to break through, we need to move off worry. The second thing is we need to pray about everything. Pray about everything. There is nothing that we worry about that isn't important enough to pray about. We need to pray about everything. Don't worry, Paul says, about anything, but in everything through prayer and petition with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. Then thirdly, he says we need to thank God in all things. I want you to notice he doesn't say that we thank God for all things, because there's some situations that we're wanting him to break through that we can't be thankful for. But we can still be thankful in all things. Even during those times, we can still maintain a spirit of thankfulness. And then fourthly, he says we need to think on some new things. Think on some new things. So the whole process, we're trying to move off of worry to pray about everything, to have a spirit of thankfulness, even amid the things that we're longing for God to break through. And then we start thinking differently. Remember back to what I said about the nature of the Philistines as they're coming against David. They're filling the valley, it's spreading, the giants. That kind of thought process is what happens to us when we're wanting God to break through, and we're just sitting back and we're not being faithful ourselves. We're wanting God to take care of all this. We've got to come to a point where we say, okay, this stinking thinking is not going to give God the power to break through. I've got to change what I'm thinking. So, think about what is true. We go back to that list of areas where we're wanting God to break through. We're weary, we're tired, we want this to change, whatever it is. Is that true thinking? How about the things that are noble, things that are right, the things that are pure, what things that are lovely and admirable, the things that are excellent and praiseworthy? You see, if we begin to change our mind, then the very nature of what we're wanting God to break through with becomes different. While most of us can relate to praying for a breakthrough that we so desperately desire, we may have missed the significance of what needs to precede those prayers. We must first move off worry. Then we must pray. We must be thankful. And we must think differently. But it's the first one. I think it's the first one that derails most of us. And that is, we just don't know how to move off worry. And that's the subject for next week, is how to help ourselves gain such focus that we can get beyond worry to the point of allowing God his opportunity to break through and to show himself strong. Anybody not need that? Okay. All right.